to Networking Unleashed, Building Profitable Connections. Welcome to the show, folks. I'm your host, Michael Forman, and you're listening to the podcast where networking is more than just an awkward handshake and bad coffee. Yes, it's an art and a talent. But here's the twist, it's an art and talent you can actually learn. Yes, even if you're the person hiding in the corner at every event pretending to check emails. It's a game changer. When you get good at it, you'll wonder why you didn't start sooner. More connections, more opportunities, and more profits. It's like unlocking a cheat code for life. So whether you're the life of the party or just the let me stay at home and text type, we've got something for you. So stick around. Let's turn those awkward small talk moments into big wins. And I have he's quite an interesting young man. He's 29 years old. First of all, his name is Victor Catrina. He's 29 years old and he runs, ready for this, a 7-figure coaching business. Now, you might want to know how he got here. Well, he's teaching YouTube automation.
I'm doing amazing, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on the
Okay, that's
show.
great. So, listen, Victor, tell me it up with a brief bio of yourself. Why don't you tell me what you're up to?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time. I've gone through a lot of businesses, like you mentioned, and it's kind of led me up to where I am now. And I can indulge a little bit more when I get into my story. But realistically, yeah, I've gotten to the point where I've really built this coaching company. I've been able to make some massive impact, influence a lot of people, help a lot of people to generate income on the side or replace their incomes with this YouTube business model. And it's really gotten to the point where I see massive vision, massive opportunity for the future, where I could really now go from hundreds to thousands of people and so on and so forth. So yeah, if you want to know what the future looks like, I really think it's just continuing to do what I'm already really good at and what I'm seeing a lot of impact on, which is just continuing this coaching company.
Well, that's an interesting segue because I want to know how you approach increasingly digital.
How do we build genuine connections
Over
in
a
a
digital
world
world. Now,
that's
when I teach networking events, feel the vibe of the
yeah.
room, the vibe of the person, but how is it done digitally?
Good question. I mean, that's the big issue that's happening with the evolution of the digital space is that the more connected we become, we actually become more separated because the larger these networks get of these conglomerates of people, the more difficult it is to connect everyone because everyone's in their own continent and owns the world. Now, what we do specifically in our community with our students is that we have these live group settings. So these group calls have multiple purposes. Number one, of course, to be able to dissect everyone's YouTube channels and analyze the statistics and strategy. But number two is to really bring people together. So we have around 9 group calls every single week with all of our students. And that kind of opens up the doors for all the students to come together to get to know each other on a face-to-face basis. Everyone has their cameras on, everyone's engaging, and that in turn builds a lot of genuine relationships. We've seen business partnerships come out of this and just friendships and people connecting. I've had some people meet up in person. The requirement that we have where people have to show up to these calls has actually opened up the digital space and brought it more into the material plane, which is very cool.
That's very cool. It's great the way that you're bringing together because across the YouTube channels and the way that you bring the classroom setting, but you're teaching that one-on-one which is so important with the
Right.
networking and networking world. Can you share a specific example of a strategic networking relationship that impacted your business?
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be, it was an intentional relationship, which was actually me seeking mentorship. So me seeking mentorship directly was I was able to be under the influence of someone who had what I wanted, right? They'd already gone through the process of building a 7, 8 figure coaching business. So I think that kind of strategic connection and relationship was somebody who had the influence and the knowledge that I needed. And that's just really the power of connecting with other people who have that influence or knowledge base that you need, because they're able to really accelerate that entire process. They have the roadmap, right? They know exactly what to do and more importantly, what not to do, which is very, very important to learn from other people's failures. I'd have to say, really, I think it was my first mentor who I hired, and he was able to really streamline the entire process and more or less open up my eyes. And I was able to see things in a completely different light, and I was able to prioritize different things and focus on the highest leverage levers that I had to pull to make the highest impact in my business and with my community as well, which is a huge impact there. So I'd have to say directly is mentorship.
So important with what we handle networking from different sides of this, but it's so important to find that person or people to mentor you because, listen, let's face facts. We don't know everything, right? And we're trying to get as much knowledge
Right.
as possible. So why not go to somebody that has that knowledge and let us help us? So that's very good. What are some of the key elements? Um, what are the key elements that you have for effective communication with professional networking?
I think it really boils down to intentional question asking. Everything comes down to how effective you can be in the communication through questions, seeking to understand. You kind of emphasized it before, like we don't know what we don't know. And so through intentional question asking, we're able to harness other people's knowledge. And then again, through effective application, use that for our own instances and businesses. And so I think the most power comes from your ability to ask the right questions. Asking questions in general is a great thing, but how effective your question asking is really going to influence the output that you get from any interaction with someone who you want to, have influence from or gain knowledge from. I think that's kind of my
That's
opinion there.
great. Okay, so how would you recommend that somebody who is afraid of networking, how do they go out there, jump in the game and say, look, for my business, I need to network and I need to get my word out there, or I need to go out and find a mentor, but I'm afraid of going out there and beginning my networking strategy. How would you recommend that a person does that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, if you are really introverted and you have money, I would just go directly and pay someone and just have them teach you. If you want to gain the respect and trust of a mentor, to have them come to you, or build some sort of relationship where they can be influencing you and teaching you, I think there needs to be an exchange of value. That's just my opinion. I really think that if you want someone to invest into you, there needs to be some sort of mutual exchange. You just have to show that you've done your due diligence. So by that, I mean spending the time, the private victories, like spending time to actually educate yourself, to really just level up your knowledge base, to come to a place where if you have a conversation with somebody that you want to be influenced by or taught by, that you can actually hold a conversation. And that requires you to go into the darkness and spend time there to just educate yourself. Read the books that they're reading, right? Watch the videos that they're watching, read the articles that they're reading. Like basically, at least have a way to connect with them on a level where you're not just completely in the dark when they say things, and you have this mutual connection and you can relate and relay off of their conversations. They will feel that you've done your due diligence and you're at least in a place where you are privy and subject to their teachings, versus if you come and you're completely in the dark and you haven't done any work and they're trying to give you information, they're not going to be as interested to be vested in you if they haven't seen you've done anything. But if you've done some due diligence or a lot of due diligence, it's going to give them a lot more reasoning and desire to spend and input their time.
Okay.
Again,
Well,
my opinion.
listen, that's great. You know, when we first began the podcast, you spoke of failures, how you really look at failures more so than what you've done well. So, give me an example or two of your major failures and you found a way to overcome it.
Yeah, like you're absolutely right, and that's something I love to emphasize is the power of failure, and I think it's really just something that's not emphasized enough. It's such a thing that people are fearful of. I mean, naturally, failure, but really, it's such a building block to success. Success is not a straight road, as anyone who's been successful would tell you. So, one thing, just kind of an analogy I like to bring up, and I think it was Hermosi who brought this up, but every single failure acts kind of like a bridge that you're building across. So you have this river, this rocky river, and you want to build a bridge across. And so each business that you have is like a stone that you place, which eventually, failure after failure after failure, people look at it like the last brick was laid and that was the successful business, and every other business was irrelevant and not necessary. But in reality, each one was that building block that led to the evolution and building of that bridge that got you there. So all these failures really do act as prerequisites and fundamental knowledge, and so much like theory and application that's done through these failures that you don't know when it's going to be used until the final thing, that one thing that finally takes off. And that's kind of how it was for me. So I had all these multiple businesses that I tried, and I failed one, and then I failed the next, and then the next. But each one I learned something. I learned web design, I learned ads, I learned something. And each of these skill sets on their own didn't serve a purpose. But then finally I built a marketing agency where I needed all those skill sets. And they just came in perfectly because I had built them and I was knowledgeable in them, and I was able to scale my first company to 30,000 a month from never having seen really any money in any other business. So I could have looked at it like, wow, I should have just done marketing this whole time, but I would have never made that money if it wasn't for everything else that built up these skill sets. Right. So that's kind of why I see this as definitely a necessity, not for everyone. Maybe it's just me and a lot of people that I know as well, failure, but it's a powerful thing that you can really harness because number one, it's going to teach you a lot about yourself. And number two, it's going to build a massive amount of resilience if you allow it to, right? It can tear you down or it can build you up. And you just have to always look at failure as an opportunity to go into the next thing or just grow, right? I truly believe that failure is there for a reason, to teach you a lesson, not to tear you down, typically. And so the last thing there too is like failure is only when you stop. There's no such thing as failure until you quit. That's the definition of failure. So no one really fails until they give up.
That's
And
great.
yeah, that's my
That's
spiel
exactly
there.
the story where a gentleman had a pencil company, and all he did was make pencils. And one of his workers said, how difficult is this? I can make a pencil, I can make the eraser, I can make the lead, I can go into business for myself. Wait a second, he's not paying me enough to do what I do. I think I'm just going to quit. Or better yet, I want a piece of his profits. And he brings it to the owner, and the owner said, well, you're talking about this business, but what about all my years of looking up how to do the business and all the money I lost after doing the business? So you're not looking at how I got here, you're looking at once I got here. And that opened his eyes and said, well, you know what? Maybe he's right. Okay, what would you say? You've built up a lot of networking relationships. How do you stay in touch with them?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say that was a great story. It's definitely a perfect example of why, employees and business owners are paid differently. Entrepreneurs are taking on a different level of risk that the employees aren't, and that's just risk
Yeah.
compensation differences, we'll call it. But yeah, that's a great story. How do we nurture relationships? I mean, it's an active effort, just like anything, just like nurturing relationships with your family and your friends. It's just keeping a close eye on your network. So I have a pretty large network myself with some pretty high level entrepreneurs, and I want to make sure I stay in touch. What I do really well is that I'm able to provide enough value through the interactions that I have. And they also know I'm very, very busy. So, I do make it known that I'm alive. Of course, I post actively and stuff like this. And so they know I'm there. And I try and just engage with them as well. So social media does really help kind of keep an eye on each other and kind of bump each other a little bit. So I like their stuff or I'll comment on their posts and then vice versa. So we don't actually have to have too many conversations to keep in touch. Unless, again, it seems like there's a good vibe going on and we can kind of find some mutual exchange. Then we kind of have some more active conversations. But I love to have connection calls with people. I'll find an entrepreneur, I'll reach out and just say, hey, seems like we're in the same space. Love to just get on a call, see if we can exchange some value. That is a great way for me to just kind of break that first barrier. And if I feel like there's just more that needs to be said and more conversations to be had, we of course book more. Otherwise, it's that like kind of small little. I got on Facebook, it used to be like this person poked you. They're just like keeping pokes on each other to let each other know you're still thinking of each other. And that's just how I keep my relationships more or less active because it's difficult to maintain a lot of relationships while still running the business. We have hundreds of students. It's definitely a lot of conversations. And then I have to keep my girlfriend very, very busy as well. So that's an important one.
Very important. Always keep them happy.
Yes.
Within the networking world, there's a saying that's very important. If they know you, if they like you and trust you, they'll do business with you.
Right.
It becomes like, well, okay, yeah, everybody does that. Well, let's break it down just a little bit further. If to know you, well, everybody knows you because you're out there and they see you. Now, they like you, well, that's a different story because not as many people are going to like you as know you, right?
Absolutely.
Easy parts of the three. But trust you, that trust factor is a major factor. So you have to build that trust in whatever time that you have. Now, I talk about networking events, about how you have 30 seconds to build up that trust, but you may have 5 minutes on a phone call, on a podcast, whatever the case may be. But you need to build up that level of trust before you go any further. So that level of
Definitely.
trust
Yeah.
is it's crucial. Okay. Um, let's bring this to a different, a little inundating for an introvert. It'll basically crush them. But do you have
Right.
any tips or tricks that you use when you go to a networking event?
Yeah. I mean, a couple things. Great question. A couple things you can do. Number one, going back to the original statement I made, come prepared. Come prepared to have conversation topics, to be able to relate to people on levels. Really do due diligence as well. Like go find out who's going to be at that seminar. And again, try and study their life. A lot of times you can see what they're reading on social media, what they're watching, what's their political opinions, right? Educate yourself so you can have these initial conversations and break the ice really easily. So that's a whole different level of due diligence is going and stalking people, but it actually pays dividends. It's a crazy, crazy way to just be proactive versus reactive, really. And secondly, you coming with someone really helps too. If you come with a friend, a best friend, or your partner or something, having someone else there that can just push you a little bit from behind and say, hey, I know we're both terrified, but if we go together, it won't be as intimidating. So I really think, yeah, double teaming it could be a great way to overcome some of the initial fear. And then again, coming prepared is a
I agree
fantastic
with
one.
you. If you're an introvert, you need that person.
Yes.
Now, I'm from the Air Force, so I use an Air Force term, wingman, on
Okay.
him and kind of push you when
Yeah.
you need to be pushed. But if you're an extrovert, if you're going out to do networking, I always suggest go alone. Don't go with somebody. You don't want to
Hmm.
use that crutch, or if you find a little lull in the excitement, you're going to speak with that person and take your mind away from networking. When you're networking, you have to be focused. You have to treat
Right.
it like it's a job, and you have to be organized.
It's intent.
And when you're keeping in touch with your relationships, I would suggest using a CRM because that way you can organize all of your relationships. So, bringing this down a little bit, give me an essential tip that you would give someone that would like to improve their networking or sales skills.
Okay. On someone trying to improve their networking. I want to just speak
Sure.
one last thing because the last point you made is really, really intelligent to have this CRM. So, what I have done for myself is I built a Rolodex, and I did that actually on ChatGPT. So, basically, when I have connection calls with people, because you can go into ChatGPT, you can say something and you can say, can you please store this in your memory bank? So, I'd say, this is the person, and this is all their qualities, what they do for business, their annual income, any connections that they have, what they're good at, and what they might need help on. And you just fill up that Rolodex. And then I can pull it up at any time and populate it and say, I know this person who has this. Is anyone in my network able to help him with this problem? And it can sift through all those people. And if you want to kind of create that connection with somebody, it's really easy to just tap into
What you're
like
saying
AI.
is so very important because one thing I stress is whenever you go to one of these networking events, you're looking to give, not receive. How can you put two
Yes.
people together
Yes.
and you can bow out gracefully? All you're doing is putting them together. So, one of the things that I always recommend whenever you get that person, that prospective client, you say to him, I like you. I like how you do business. How can I make you more successful? How can I be a good referral source for you? But you always look to give, not receive. So
Right.
after everything we've discussed, what's your favorite marketing tactic?
Again, you kind of cut out. What's my
Marketing
favorite
tactic.
marketing tactic? Oh, for what specifically? Marketing myself or my business or
Your choice, your business.
for my business specifically, again, being social media based, we like long form is, I can't stress the importance of long form with anything. So we do short form with Instagram, we do long form marketing, obviously through YouTube. And it's, statistically proven long form will convert at a 30 to 60% rate higher than short form, just because people are able to spend more time with you on that content. The longer they spend watching you, the more authority that you build, the more you can edify yourself, and the more trust is built. So by far, long form content is always going to be the winner. It's always king. And then of course, in person is the best, but it's just you can't multiply in person as much as a video that can be sent out to millions of people at the same time. So that's one thing. But I have to say, of course, in person is unbeatable,
Absolutely.
unshakable. After that would have to be long form content because it's getting long form and podcast. Podcast is really nice too because the longer they can spend with somebody, the more they get to like, know, and trust them is really the
And
essence. So you're absolutely right. That
that's
like,
the
know, trust
essence of
is
networking. It really is. No matter how you slice it, to know you, like
yeah,
you, and trust you, that's how they're going to do business with you. Okay.
yeah.
One takeaway from everything we said that somebody within my audience can use tomorrow. What can they do?
Yeah, I think you said it before I did, and I'm so happy you did. It's such a beautiful thing you said, and that this applies way beyond networking, way beyond business. Is life in general. It's not about what we get; it's about what we give. Like you said it so beautifully, and if you use that and allow it to transcend into everything that you do, especially business and networking, you'll be extremely successful. So I do the exact same thing and I ask a very similar set of questions, which is, once you've gone through introducing each other, like how can I be of service? Like how can I provide some value? I want to just do something. And that genuine kind of without any expectation in return, just very kind of altruistic, emotional, messaging goes such a long way because people, especially people who have something to give, if they're an 8-figure entrepreneur or something, you're trying to connect with them. A lot of people think when you want to connect with them, they want to leech off of you. These people think that people want to leech off of them. And so when you are that one person that comes to them and does the opposite, wants to provide value and wants to give, it usually takes people off of, it's not what people expect. It's not what these entrepreneurs and people expect. And that's a beautiful thing to be that one person who just, when everyone goes left, you go right. So you said it perfectly. And that's probably the biggest takeaway when it comes to networking. And it's a combination of the two, which is coming prepared because you can't just say I'm going to give value and have nothing to offer, right? So that second part is the byproduct of the first. So really has to be due diligence is being intentional about educating yourself, putting yourself uh, having the right kind of knowledge base. So networking books is great. Leadership books are amazing to read. Business acumen books are incredible. Mindset books, and just spending some time with yourself and reflecting on learning, like figuring out who you are and just getting a good grip on who you are. So a lot of personal development has to go into networking. I don't think you can do effective networking if you haven't done effective self-development. That's part one. And then part two, get value.
That's perfect. Victor, I can't tell you this whole session was because you showed us what, after you have made it as a seven-figure entrepreneur, moving it to a YouTube and showing people how to do a YouTube company and everything else. So you're showing us how you networked, why you've networked. And so this has all been fantastic. If somebody wanted to get hold of you or wanted to hire you or hire your company, how would they do it?
Yeah, my primary place for communication would be Instagram. It's my full name. So Victor Catrina with a C would be the way to find me. And it's YouTube automation is what it's actually called. And what's really cool and unique about it is that we're able to create videos without showing our face or creating the videos ourselves. The essence and the beauty of the business is that we don't create the videos, we actually delegate that entire creation process out to freelancers. We use AI to create these videos. And then when we create these videos, we post them and accumulate hundreds and thousands of millions of views. And then the ads, they get placed on our videos. And every time there's an ad that's played, YouTube compensates us, which is a really interesting business model. Because again, going back to the introverted people, a lot of introverted people don't want to show their face or put themselves out there. This is a really unique business model that's brought a lot of people who are just afraid of the traditional business into business and able to make a lot of money. So I work with a lot of introverted people. Let's just say it's a hot business model for them, and it's opened up a lot of doors for people. It's a very interesting business model. But yeah, if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about it, I do offer consultations and discovery calls if you're at all interested in learning more. So just message me on Instagram. We can set up a call, see if it's a fit, and we can go from there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. This has been wonderful.
Michael, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that's a wrap, folks. A huge thank you to our special guest for sharing such incredible insights today. And of course, a big shout out to you, our amazing listeners, for tuning in and spending your time with us. Remember, networking isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. So take what you've learned today, get out there, and make some meaningful connections. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who could use a little networking inspiration. Let's keep the conversation going. You can find me on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or my website, michaelaforman.com. Remember, until next time, keep practicing, keep connecting, and keep building those relationships. This is Michael A. Forman signing off. Take care and happy networking.